December 1944. A snow-covered American command post in the Ardennes forest operates under the heavy silence of winter warfare. Radio operators sit by their flickering equipment, listening to the steady static of a frozen front line. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through the white noise on official military frequencies. The unmistakable cadence of General George S. Patton orders all 3rd Army units to abandon the Bastogne sector and retreat 30 kilometers immediately. This unexpected command sparks widespread confusion across the line. Panic flares in the headsets as exhausted men prepare to leave their hard-fought trenches. But a single observant communications officer notices a fatal flaw in the audio stream, setting off a countdown to a high-stakes counter-broadcast that will prove a stolen voice can never match the secret truth of the man who owns it. This is the incredible story of what happened when German intelligence deployed a perfect voice imitation of General Patton to broadcast a fake withdrawal order, nearly collapsing the entire Western Front during the Battle of the Bulge. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show how the right question kills the wrong cover. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Yates was a 41-year-old communications officer at 3rd Army Headquarters, who hailed from the quiet neighborhoods of Indianapolis, Indiana, before answering the call to arms. He had spent 15 long years working as a dedicated commercial broadcast engineer, leaving behind a comfortable home, a loving wife, and 2 young daughters to enlist immediately after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor. The tragic, sudden loss of his younger brother during the bloody North African campaign had deeply scarred him, transforming his technical expertise into a quiet, relentless obsession with operational precision, radio discipline, and data security. On this freezing December morning, Yates sat huddled inside the crowded Luxembourg communications bunker, with his heavy headphones pressed tight against his ears. His senses finely tuned to the routine static of the front line, when the strange voice transmission suddenly shattered the morning airwaves. Oberleutnant Karl Müller was a 34-year-old radio propaganda specialist from Berlin, directing the highly deceptive broadcast from a heavily concealed facility located near Trier. Müller firmly believed that modern total warfare was ultimately won not merely by cold steel and heavy artillery, but through the absolute, ruthless mastery of the enemy's psychological vulnerabilities and deep anxieties. He frequently boasted to his high-ranking superiors that a perfectly timed radio deception could fracture American operational coherence, spread mass panic, and completely dismantle an entire advancing army faster than a full division of heavy Tiger tanks. Safely insulated from the brutal freezing mud of the Ardennes trenches, Müller wore a perfectly tailored officer's wool uniform and carried himself with an immense, unearned arrogance, a pristine Iron Cross First Class pinned neatly above his pocket. He stood quietly watching his engineered audio equipment spin, absolutely confident that his meticulously crafted deception would alter the entire course of the winter offensive. The Ardennes offensive had caught the Allied High Command completely by surprise. It was a brutal, freezing winter, and the German army had gathered its remaining panzer divisions for one final, desperate gamble to split the American and British forces. Dapperic fog and heavy snowstorms blanketed the entire region, grounding the dominant Allied air forces and cutting off isolated infantry units across a massive, chaotic front. The sudden onslaught created deep fractures in the front line, disrupting standard telephone wires and forcing regiments to rely almost entirely on vulnerable radio transmissions. Infiltrators in captured jeeps were already running rampant behind the lines, turning road signs, cutting communication lines, and spreading wild rumors to maximize the panic. The entire theater was trapped in a thick fog of war where certainty was impossible to find. In the weeks leading up to this crisis, several frontline commanders had noticed unusual radio interference and conflicting reports on their tactical nets. Some operators had even flagged strange voice transmissions that sounded vaguely official but lacked proper authorization. However, stressed divisional officers routinely brushed these warnings aside. They were completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the German breakthrough and dismissed the oddities as simple atmospheric distortion or common clerical errors made by exhausted staff. Nobody wanted to waste precious time chasing ghosts when real panzer columns were actively breaching their defensive perimeters. This widespread negligence allowed the deceptive broadcasting operation to grow bolder, pushing its dangerous signals deeper into the American network. But the fragile web of lies was finally spinning out toward its ultimate target. Inside the crowded headquarters bunker, the tape reel turned slowly as the artificial voice finished its third broadcast. Captain Thomas Finch pressed his cold fingers against his heavy headphones, tuning the metal dials of his signal core receiver to lock onto the rogue radio transmission originating from the eastern sector. He quickly keyed his desk microphone, attempting to establish direct contact with the hostile station that was throwing the entire American front line into absolute chaos. This is 3rd Army Net Control calling the unidentified station currently broadcasting on frequency 42.5. State your operator identification and your mandatory morning authentication sequence. You are listening to the official command frequency of the 3rd Army, and you will immediately keep this net entirely clear for urgent operational directives from your superiors. Finch adjusted his handwritten logbook, his voice remaining completely calm, steady, and professional as he followed standard operating procedures. Station on 42.5. Your transmission entirely lacks the mandatory morning cipher required for all high-level theater broadcasts, understanding operational orders. The voice on the other end laughed, a cold, mocking sound that rippled clearly through the freezing bunker speakers. Your ciphers are entirely irrelevant now, American. Finch leaned closer to the microphone, citing explicit military protocol to assert total authority over the communication net. You are in direct violation of Theater Communications Regulation 600-20, and you are ordered to cease transmission immediately and provide your exact coordinates. The German operator, Oberleutnant Karl Müller, abandoned his fake American accent completely, his true voice dripping with immense ideological arrogance. Your ridiculous regulations cannot save a dying army that is currently freezing to death in the Ardennes snow, Captain. Identify your location and your command unit immediately. Station 42.5. I am Oberleutnant Karl Müller of the Wehrmacht, and we have spent 18 long months perfectly recording and splicing your General S voice to shatter your pathetic will. You are broadcasting unauthorized, criminal fabrications to American troops. We hold your codes, we hold your voices, and within 72 hours, our superior German engineering will completely dismantle your entire chaotic, mongrel force. Cease your transmission, Müller. Your exhausted troops are already turning their jeeps around and retreating because they utterly lack the genetic stamina to withstand our final winter offensive. Finch quickly switched off the microphone transmitter, his face turning entirely pale as he realized the terrifying scale of the deception happening over the airwaves. He ripped the recorded log sheet from his steel clipboard and hurried toward the senior command office. The urgent report reached Patton within the hour. Patton's jeep pulled up to the command post unannounced. The general walked into the bunker with his polished helmet reflecting the dim lights, his 4 stars clearly visible, and his signature ivory-handled revolvers strapped to his waist. Every operator in the room instantly snapped to attention. He did not raise his voice. Patton looked at Yates, then picked up the radio microphone connected to the German frequency. Did you synthesize my voice to command an American retreat, Lieutenant? Mueller's voice crackled back over the speaker. I did, General. And your men are already obeying my perfect recording. Did you believe a collection of edited syllables could successfully move my army? It already has, Patton, because your troops cannot tell the difference. Do you truly believe a stolen accent gives you the authority to dictate my lines? It gives me total control over your broken front. General, you sit safely inside a warm broadcasting facility near Trier, mistakenly believing you have mastered the psychological art of modern warfare by splicing together old scraps of my intercepted radio transmissions. You genuinely think that because your mechanical composite sounds exactly like George Patton, it carries the sovereign authority to dictate the movements of the United States Army. But a real military command is never a theatrical performance, and a veteran fighting force is not an audience to be tricked by clever vocal mimicry. My middle name is Smith. I was born in the year 1885, and I served dutifully at Camp Meade alongside Dwight Eisenhower in 1919. These are solid, unyielding historical truths that your complex German recording machines can never extract from a stolen broadcast. While you spent 18 long months playing with edited tape reels and celebrating your unearned Iron Cross, Lieutenant Colonel Yates and my dedicated communications team have been actively analyzing your frequencies through the freezing mud of the Ardennes. They do not rely on cheap theatrical illusions because they possess the gritty, analytical reality required to expose the subtle gaps in your artificial speech. Now you face two options. You can use your microphone to broadcast an immediate, total retraction of your fraudulent withdrawal orders to every American unit right now, or you can remain at your dials and face the absolute destruction of your facility by our incoming bombers. Choose within the next 10 seconds because this deception ends today. The German operator completely refused to comply, cutting the transmission with a sharp burst of angry static. Yates quickly organized the emergency counter-broadcast, patching the general directly into the primary theater command network at exactly 14:30 hours. Patton grabbed the heavy microphone and spoke with his characteristic, unfiltered directness to every shivering soldier across the snow-covered Ardennes front line. He declared that he had never issued any withdrawal order from Bastogne, branding the previous transmission as a hostile German radio deception. To prove his identity beyond any doubt, the general broadcast highly specific personal facts that only he and his immediate staff could ever know, citing his middle name of Smith, his birth year of 1885, and his early tank service at Camp Meade with Eisenhower in 1919. He sealed the message with the unique tactical code phrase, "Saturday morning quarterback," ordering every unit to verify future commands through direct telephone or written couriers. The clear counter message immediately reached the confused frontline regiments, completely neutralizing the enemy trick and halting the unauthorized retreat before any operational ground was lost. Patton then ordered his intelligence section to locate the source of the rogue signal. Within 24 hours, American radio direction-finding teams pinned the transmission to the facility near Trier, sending a squadron of 9th Air Force B-26 bombers to obliterate the entire station in a cloud of high explosives. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Yates returned to Indianapolis after the war, resuming his career as a radio engineer at a local station. He worked in broadcast media for 40 years, before retiring in 1985, keeping the memories of that deceptive transmission close for the rest of his life. He died in 2007. The enduring lesson he demonstrated, which involved listening for the subtle artificiality of edited audio, is still taught in communication schools today. Oberleutnant Karl Müller was captured by Third Army forces in March 1945 and tried as a propaganda specialist. He served a short 3-year prison sentence before his release in 1948, returning to Munich to work in state radio production for 35 years. In 1985, he wrote a brief German memoir titled The Voice I Could Not Use, which detailed the exact mechanics of his failed imitation plot. General Patton never spoke about the psychological deception publicly, keeping the technical report quietly tucked away inside his desk. He noted in a private diary entry that even a perfect voice cannot carry knowledge it does not have, proving that authentication will always beat clever imitation. His personal reflection concluded that the math remained on the American side, because he was still the only person who knew exactly where he had served in 1919. Some historians have argued that Patton acted too recklessly by broadcasting his highly specific personal details over unsecured military airwaves, potentially exposing critical command secrets to enemy eavesdroppers. Others have argued the opposite, claiming that his direct, raw vocal intervention was the only rapid method available to halt the spreading operational panic before entire American divisions abandoned their defensive lines in the snow. What is certain is that this high-stakes radio battle permanently destroyed Germany's tactical voice spoofing program, establishing a durable wartime lesson that raw operational knowledge will always defeat the most sophisticated technological illusions. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have risked broadcasting your personal details on the open airwaves, or would you have used a slower, safer authentication method? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about how the right question kills the wrong cover, make sure to subscribe.